Part of the newest addition to APA Style is the new chapter dedicated entirely to the use of bias-free language. This is incredibly important since symbols are deeply embedded within our language. We often have many ways of saying the same thing, but the word choice can make all the difference in how one understands the message that we're trying to send. For example, let's take the word old. This might conjure a number of symbols, including but not limited to ancient, traditional, decrepit, experienced, geriatric, mature, obsolete, antique, or vintage. It's safe to say that most of the time, we don't want to tell someone that they're ancient or decrepit. So, to avoid unintended bias, APA has some specific recommendations. First, be as precise as possible. So, for example, if we're discussing who is at a higher risk for heart disease, we would want to specify that those who are 65 and older are at a higher risk, rather than just stating that older people are more at risk. APA also emphasizes the importance of being precise when reporting on socioeconomic statuses, since there can be bias embedded within many of these terms. For example, rather than saying low-income individuals, you could instead specify their income levels compared to the poverty line, such as individuals with an income of $12,760 or less. Second, use the proper terms. This might seem like a no-brainer, but if you're unfamiliar with the subject, the terms may be confusing at first. And even if you are familiar with the topic, things can change quickly, so it's important to be diligent and research which terms are currently accepted. For example, it's important to understand the difference between sex and gender. Sex is a biological concept. It refers to physical characteristics like body parts and hormones. On the other hand, gender is a cultural concept that's related to cultural norms and expectations. A good example of this is the idea that pink is for girls. Next, APA emphasized the importance of using gender-friendly terms. To do this, avoid using polarizing words like mailman, mankind, or waitress. Instead, try a friendlier term like mail carrier, humanity, or server. They also endorse the use of they or their if you're not sure about a gender. In a similar vein, APA also cautions us on how we use labels. As we saw earlier with the adjective old, words often have unintended, deeper meanings. APA recommends avoiding the use of adjectives as nouns like the visually impaired. Instead, use the adjectives as adjectives like the visually impaired individuals. Alternatively, you could use descriptive phrases like people with visual impairments. This is important because when we refer to people using adjectives as nouns, we simplify complex individuals into a single aspect of their life. By doing this, we miss a lot of what's going on, because the different parts of your identity can have profound impacts on your experiences. This concept is called intersectionality, and it was introduced in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw. She argued that the fight for gender equality was focused on the rights of white women, and the fight for race equality was focused on the rights of black men. This view of sexism and racism neglected to cover some of the issues that black women faced. This is because black women don't face sexism and racism separately, but rather they're compounded into a new beast altogether. To get a better idea of what that means, let's consider an example. Let's meet Kathy. Kathy experiences discrimination due to her gender and race. She shares some of those experiences with gender discrimination with her friends Jenny and Susan. But there are experiences that are unique to Kathy due to her race. In fact, Jenny and Susan each have experiences that the others don't share due to their differences in race, religion, sexual orientation, age, and much more. It's also important to keep in mind that this is present in large-scale issues as well, like the pay gap. In 2019, the American Association of University Women reported that based on median earnings, on average, women earn about $45,000 a year, while on average men make about $55,000 a year. That means that on average, American women make about 82 cents for every dollar the American man makes. However, that's not the full picture. Let's examine how race impacts pay for median weekly earnings. For men, we can see that Asian men have the highest median weekly earnings with $1,241, while Hispanic men have the lowest weekly earnings at $720. To put that into perspective, that means that for every dollar a white man makes, an Hispanic man typically makes 72 cents. There are significant gaps for the women as well. On one end of the spectrum, Asian women make about $937 a week, while Hispanic women make about $617 a week. So, if we compare it against what a white woman makes, an Hispanic woman makes 76 cents on the dollar. And then if we compared it to what a white man makes, an Hispanic woman makes 62 cents on the dollar. And as if adding race into the equation didn't make it confusing enough, age, disability, sexual orientation, parenthood, and education level also influence this issue. So while we can say that women make 82 cents per dollar a man makes, it's not revealing the whole picture. By keeping it there, we neglect to see how the pay gap impacts racial groups differently. And without understanding the full issue, we cannot create effective solutions. It would be like trying to solve a math problem when you've only been given half of the information. And really, that's why using bias-free language is so important. By eliminating the bias in our language, we can communicate more clearly and precisely, which will eventually help us to create more clear and precise solutions to our problems. For more information on bias-free language, be sure to check out the 7th edition of the APA Style Manual.
Created using Powtoon.